It wasn't a fight that ended my marriage. No slammed doors, no shattered glasses, no screaming matches at 2 o'clock in the morning. It was quieter than that. It was the way Marlene poured herself a second cup of coffee one morning, barely looking at me while my whole world was falling apart in slow motion. That's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper you almost miss if you're not paying close enough attention. My name's Colton. Not exactly the hero of a romance novel. Not some guy with a tragic backstory or an inspiring comeback arc. Just a regular man who thought loyalty still meant something. Marlene and I had been married for 7 years. Lived in a small brick house on the outskirts of Glendale, Arizona. We weren't rich, but we had built a life that felt real. Barbecues with neighbors, Sunday markets, late-night binge-watching crime shows. Or at least that's what I thought. Lately, Marlene had started dressing up more to go grocery shopping. She laughed too loudly at text messages she wouldn't let me see. She came home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. You don't have to be a detective to put the pieces together, even if every part of you wishes you couldn't. Still, I stayed quiet. I watched. I waited. Not because I was scared, but because I knew rushing would give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. And I wasn't going to give her that. Then one Sunday morning, as the sun barely climbed over the horizon, she sat across from me in the kitchen, swirling a spoon in her coffee, her eyes darting to the clock more than to me. Without lifting her gaze, she muttered, "I've had enough, Colt. I'm done." I didn't flinch. I didn't beg. I didn't even ask why. I just leaned back in my chair, feeling strangely light for the first time in months, and smiled. "Finally," I said, setting my coffee down with a soft click. She blinked, almost surprised, like she had expected me to fall apart. Maybe she wanted a reaction. Tears, yelling, bargaining. But all I gave her was indifference. She packed a suitcase that afternoon and left without looking back. I didn't chase her. I didn't call her. I didn't even lock the door after she left. Because my next move wasn't about keeping her. It was about reclaiming the life she tried to steal from me. And trust me, when Marlene walked into my new house a month later, she wasn't prepared for what she saw at my dinner table. The night Marlene left, the house felt too big for just me. The rooms echoed with her absence, and for a brief moment, I wondered if I'd made a mistake by letting her go so easily. But then I opened the kitchen drawer, the one she thought was her little secret, and found what I had suspected all along. A burner phone, cheap, disposable, filled with texts to Brent. Messages about our new life together and can't wait to be free. Photos of cheap motel rooms, promises of vacations using the money from the house sale she thought we would finalize together. Yet, letting her go wasn't a mistake. It was survival. I spent the next week methodically dismantling the life we had built. I sold the house without telling her. It was still in my name only, a technicality she must have forgotten when she got so wrapped up in her fantasy life. I moved into a sleek new condo across town, the kind of place that didn't have memories bleeding from the walls. Clean start, clean mind. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I knew Marlene would eventually come crawling back when reality hit her, when the bills piled up, when Brent got tired of pretending he could support her, when the adrenaline of sneaking around wore off and all that was left was two people who barely knew each other outside of stolen moments. While I rebuilt my life quietly, I also made sure to set the stage for her inevitable return. I reconnected with people I drifted from during the chaos of my marriage. Old friends, business contacts, even an old flame, Jessica. Jessica wasn't just some rebound. She was someone I had stupidly pushed away years ago, long before Marlene came into the picture. She had moved back to town recently, divorced, thriving, and when we met for coffee, felt like no time had passed. She laughed at my jokes without forcing it. She listened without judgment. She saw me, not the version Marlene had spent years tearing down. By the time Marlene's world started crumbling, and oh, it did, I was already standing on solid ground. The first sign of her desperation came as a text. "Marlene, we need to talk." I didn't answer. 2 days later, a missed call. Then 3, then 10. I didn't pick up once. I wanted her to feel the same kind of silence she had fed me for years, the kind that echoes louder than any screaming match ever could. Then, just as I had predicted, she showed up at my new place uninvited one Friday evening, looking a lot less glamorous than the last time I saw her. She looked worn down, makeup smudged, eyes frantic. She hadn't expected me to move on so fast. Or maybe she had believed I would be sitting in some dark living room crying over what we lost. But instead, when she opened the door and walked in without knocking, her jaw nearly hit the floor. There, sitting at my dining table, was Jessica, beautiful, confident, and completely at home, laughing with my friends over glasses of wine, wearing one of my old t-shirts like she'd always belonged. Marlene froze in the doorway, the realization hitting her all at once. She wasn't the center of my universe anymore. She wasn't even a guest star. She was a background character in a story that no longer needed her, and I hadn't even said a word yet. Marlene stood there for several seconds that felt like minutes, frozen in the doorway like a statue. Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. The weight of her choices, the weight of her arrogance, finally caught up to her in that one moment. It was almost cinematic, like the universe itself paused just so she could fully grasp how little she mattered to me now. Jessica glanced up from her wine glass, flashed Marlene a polite, almost dismissive smile, and turned her attention back to the conversation, leaving Marlene standing awkwardly at the threshold. Uninvited, unwelcome, and irrelevant. I leaned casually against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, calm as could be. I didn't rush to greet her. I didn't ask her what she wanted. I let her sit in that uncomfortable silence she had once weaponized against me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very silence she had used to torture me had now become her punishment. Finally, she managed to choke out, "Colton, can we talk?" I raised an eyebrow, pretending to think about it. Talk about what, exactly? My voice was even disinterested. She looked over at the others sitting at the table, a few of my old friends she used to belittle for not being ambitious enough. Now they were laughing, thriving, surrounding me like a fortress she couldn't penetrate. I need a minute alone," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. Her eyes darted nervously to Jessica, who remained relaxed, sipping her wine as if she hadn't just watched a live implosion. I shrugged. "You can say whatever you need to say right here. These people are my family now. If you've got something to say, they can hear it too." That hit her harder than any insult ever could. She realized in that instant that she was no longer special, no longer protected by the privacy and loyalty she had taken for granted. I wasn't shielding her from the consequences anymore. She would have to stand in the wreckage she created in front of witnesses. Her voice cracked slightly as she said, "I made a mistake." I smirked. "Which one? You're going to have to be a little more specific." She flinched as the group at the table exchanged glances, clearly amused by the pathetic scene unfolding before them. Jessica leaned over and whispered something to my friend Seth, who chuckled under his breath. It wasn't cruel. It was justice, the universe setting the scales right. Marlene stepped inside, closing the door behind her, as if that would somehow put the pieces back together. She took a hesitant step toward me, but I didn't move an inch. I stayed exactly where I was, solid, grounded, untouchable. "Brent. He's not who I thought he was," she said, lowering her voice as if that would earn her some sympathy. "Yeah," I said casually. "They rarely are." Tears welled up in her eyes now, but they didn't move me. I remembered every time I had cried in silence while she was out, working late. I remembered every excuse, every cold shoulder, every night I wondered why I wasn't enough. Those memories hardened me, made me immune to the act she was putting on. "Now I want to come back," she whispered. I laughed, an actual genuine laugh, not out of anger, but from pure disbelief. "You thought you could just walk back into my life after you set it on fire?" She opened her mouth again, but I held up a hand to stop her. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was free. "Marlene, you made your choice, and so did I." I walked back to the dining table, sat down next to Jessica, and picked up my glass of wine. Marlene just stood there, helpless and lost. watching as the life she had once ruled moved on without her. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like the one who lost everything. She did. Marlene didn't leave right away. She lingered there by the door, like maybe if she stood still long enough, time would rewind and erase the choices she had made. But reality was relentless. She was a ghost at her own funeral, watching the life she abandoned flourish without her. She wiped at her eyes once, then squared her shoulders like she was trying to summon the old version of herself, the one who used to control every room she walked into. But whatever power she once held over me, it was gone. "Colton, please," she said again, her voice cracking. "We can fix this." Jessica turned her head slightly and gave her a look that said everything without a single word. "You're too late." I could have humiliated her further. I could have listed every betrayal she thought she had hidden. I could have thrown the texts, the hotel receipts, the burner phone evidence right in her face. But I didn't need to. She knew. She knew I knew. And she knew that I was no longer the man who would fight for scraps of her affection. Instead, I stood up slowly, walked toward her with measured steps, and handed her a plain white envelope. No words, just a simple gesture. She took it with shaking hands, confused, anxious. Her eyes darted up to meet mine, searching for any trace of forgiveness. There was none. She tore the envelope open right there, desperate to cling to whatever hope she thought it contained. But the second she saw the papers inside, her face drained of color. Divorce papers, not just the standard kind either. I had prepared everything with the best lawyer in town. Clear, binding, swift. No second chances, no negotiations. Every asset still under my name. Every loophole closed. "You already signed everything months ago," I said quietly. "You just didn't realize it." She staggered back a step, clutching the papers like they burned her fingers. "What do you mean?" I shrugged. "Remember when you rushed me into signing all those refinance documents so you could help our future? You signed too. You just didn't read the fine print." My friends at the table watched in stunned silence. Not because they didn't know. I had told them everything, but because seeing it unfold in real time was another level of satisfaction. "You tricked me," she whispered. "No," I said simply. "You tricked yourself." Marlene's mouth opened and closed like she wanted to argue, to blame, to lash out. But she couldn't. She knew she had gambled and lost. And the house always wins when you bet with lies. Jessica came up beside me, sliding her hand into mine naturally as if it belonged there all along. That one gesture crushed whatever tiny hope Marlene had left. It wasn't just that I had moved on. It was that I had upgraded in every sense of the word. Emotionally, socially, financially. Marlene looked around the room one last time, desperate for something. Pity, sympathy, anything. But all she found was indifference. She wasn't the victim here. She was the architect of her own downfall. Without another word, she turned and fled into the night, slamming the door behind her with a finality that felt almost poetic. The silence that followed wasn't heavy or awkward. It was peaceful. It was freedom, and it was only just the beginning. The night after Marlene stormed out, I thought maybe, just maybe, she would accept the loss with a shred of dignity. I should have known better. 2 days later, she showed up again. This time, she wasn't alone. She brought Brent, or what was left of him. A guy who once thought he had stolen my wife, and my life now looked like he had aged a decade in a matter of months. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow, and the swagger he once had was completely gone. I heard the knock at the door during dinner. Jessica and I had just finished setting up a small celebration. A few friends, good food, a bottle of champagne. Life had been good. I wasn't about to let Marlene and her train wreck of a lover poison that. When I opened the door, Marlene's posture screamed defiance, but her eyes betrayed her. She was desperate. Brent stood behind her, shifting uncomfortably like he already regretted agreeing to come here. I didn't say a word. I just leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, calmly waiting for the performance. "Colton," Marlene said, her voice artificially sweet, the kind of tone you reserve for a boss you're trying to impress after screwing up. "Can we come in?" I looked past her at Brent. Didn't you two have a whole new life planned? Brent cleared his throat awkwardly, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for the guy. Almost. But then I remembered the late-night texts, the motel receipts, the smirk he wore in every photo he sent her, as if he was proud of what he was doing behind my back. "Colton, please," Marlene pressed. "We have nowhere to go." Brent lost his job. The lease on his apartment fell through. We need a place to stay until we can get back on our feet. That was it. That was her master plan. After tossing me aside like yesterday's trash, after thinking she had traded up, she came crawling back. Not for love, not for regret, but for a roof and a meal. I shook my head slowly, almost laughing. "You're standing on the wrong porch, Marlene." Brent stepped forward, trying to man up. "Look, man, we made mistakes, but you don't have to be petty about it." I tilted my head. "Petty? You think refusing to house the people who betrayed me is petty?" Marlene reached out like she wanted to touch my arm, but I stepped back without hesitation. Her face crumpled as if that small rejection hurt worse than any speech I could have given. "You both made your choices," I said coldly, "and now you get to live with them together." Jessica came up behind me then, resting her hand on my back lightly, a subtle reminder that I wasn't alone anymore. I saw the flicker of pure jealousy cross Marlene's face, not just because I had moved on, but because I had upgraded in every way that mattered. "You should leave," I said, voice firm. Marlene opened her mouth to argue, but Brent had already turned away, mumbling under his breath. Without a word, he grabbed her arm and started pulling her down the porch steps. She resisted for a moment, looking back at me with pleading eyes, but I just stood there, silent and unmoving. For the second time, she disappeared into the night. But this time, there was no storming, no defiance, no drama. Just two broken people who gambled everything and ended up with nothing. I closed the door, locked it, and turned back to Jessica and my friends. The music started up again. Glasses clinked together in celebration, and the world moved forward without Marlene in it, exactly the way it was supposed to. The days rolled by quickly after that second encounter. I didn't spend them wondering where Marlene had gone or whether Brent had finally realized he had attached himself to a sinking ship. I genuinely didn't care. I was busy living the life she thought she had stolen from me, only better. Jessica and I started building something real, something untainted by betrayal and lies. Weekends became adventures instead of arguments. Dinners were filled with laughter instead of forced small talk. Nights were peaceful, not haunted by the feeling that someone was hiding something behind fake smiles. But life has a cruel sense of humor. Just when you think you've buried the past deep enough, it has a way of clawing its way back to the surface. One afternoon, as Jessica and I were setting up for a small housewarming party. New condo, new life, new beginnings. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. It was Marlene's mother. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, not since before things started unraveling. She was frantic, her words tumbling over each other so fast it took me a second to catch up. Through her sobs, I gathered that Marlene was in trouble. Serious trouble. After Brent's inevitable departure, apparently he bailed the second she became a burden instead of an upgrade. Marlene spiraled. No money, no friends, no place to stay. She had been couch surfing, borrowing, begging. She had nowhere else to go. And now she was sitting at her mother's kitchen table, broken in every way imaginable, asking for me. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, feeling absolutely nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not pity, nothing. Marlene's mother begged me to come talk to her, to help put her back together. I almost laughed out loud. Put her back together? She had shattered herself with her own hands. No one pushed her. No one forced her. Every lie, every betrayal, every smug decision to destroy what we had built, it was all her. "I'm sorry," I said calmly, "but that's not my job anymore." I ended the call and blocked the number without hesitation. Jessica watched me from across the room, concern flickering in her eyes. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. She simply walked over, wrapped her arms around me, and rested her head against my chest. "You're allowed to move on, Colt," she whispered. "You don't owe her your life." And for the first time, I realized she was right. I didn't owe Marlene closure. I didn't owe her forgiveness. I owed myself peace. That night, as the party kicked off and the condo filled with new faces, new laughter, new memories, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. The man looking back at me wasn't bitter. He wasn't broken. He wasn't lost. He was free. And somewhere out there, Marlene was learning the hardest lesson of all. When you burn a bridge, you better be prepared to swim alone. Weeks passed, and Marlene became nothing more than a faint shadow in my mind. Life had taken on a different rhythm, one that didn't involve second-guessing every smile, every phone call, every whispered conversation. It was liberating in a way I hadn't realized I was missing. I had been surviving before. Now I was living. Jessica and I were planning a trip to the mountains, something spontaneous and free, a world away from the suffocating predictability my marriage to Marlene had become. But it seemed Marlene wasn't finished trying to claw her way back into my life. It happened one Sunday afternoon. Jessica and I were sitting on the patio sipping lemonade and mapping out hiking trails when a battered blue sedan pulled up across the street. I recognized it immediately. Marlene had borrowed it from her mother countless times when we were younger and broke. Seeing it now, parked crookedly like a symbol of her desperation, I knew exactly who was inside before she even stepped out. Marlene stood there for a long time, clutching a crumpled piece of paper, her shoulders hunched, her movements hesitant. Gone was the woman who once walked through the world like it owed her something. This Marlene looked small, uncertain, almost unrecognizable. Jessica caught the movement out of the corner of her eye and tensed slightly. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Stay here," I said quietly, standing up and walking to the edge of the driveway. Marlene approached slowly, the paper shaking in her hands. When she got close enough for me to see her face clearly, I realized she had been crying hard. Her makeup was smeared, her hair a tangled mess. She looked nothing like the woman who had once smirked behind my back, trading loyalty for excitement. "I need 5 minutes," she said, her voice thin. "You already had years," I replied coolly. She flinched at that, but pushed forward, holding out the paper. It was a letter, a handwritten letter. Pathetic, desperate, full of excuses. She started rambling, words tumbling out faster than I could stop them. "I lost everything, Colton. Brent used me. He took what little money I had and left me stranded. I'm staying in my mom's basement. I'm broke. I'm alone. I was stupid. I was selfish. I thought you were the problem, but it was me. It was always me." Her chest heaved with sobs, but I felt no sympathy. I remembered the countless nights I sat alone while she made other plans, the birthday she forgot, the anniversary she skipped, the way she smiled at her phone while sitting right next to me, fully present for someone else while absent from the life we built. "I can be better," she whispered. "I just need a second chance." The old me, the man she had slowly destroyed, might have hesitated, might have believed her tears, might have wanted to save her. But that man was gone. "I'm not the man you left behind, Marlene," I said, voice steady. "And you're not the woman I married." She broke down completely then, sinking to her knees right there in the driveway, clutching the letter like it could somehow turn back time. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Cars slowed as they drove past, but I didn't move to help her. I didn't kneel. I didn't offer comfort because sometimes regret isn't enough. Sometimes the apology comes long after the damage has been done. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away. I turned and walked back to Jessica, leaving Marlene to face the consequences of a life built on betrayal. And as I sat back down beside the woman who chose me for who I was, not what I could provide, I realized something profound. I hadn't just survived Marlene's betrayal. I had won. Watching Marlene crumble in the driveway should have left some bitter aftertaste. But instead, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. There was no joy in her suffering, just the simple, undeniable truth that life had a way of restoring balance when you stop trying to control the outcome. I hadn't wished her pain. I hadn't plotted revenge. I had simply chosen myself. And sometimes that's the most powerful choice you can make. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the past for good. And when I turned, Jessica was standing there waiting, not asking questions, not demanding explanations, just being there. Her quiet presence was worth more than all the grand apologies in the world. Without a word, I pulled her into a hug, feeling her heartbeat steady against mine. It was different with her. With Jessica, there were no games, no half-truths, no fear of what tomorrow might bring. Only honesty, only peace, only a future that felt real. Weeks turned into months, and what started as casual happiness grew into something solid, something unbreakable. We traveled together. Mountains, beaches, cities lit up under starlight. We built traditions. Lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and coffee, handwritten notes left on mirrors, spontaneous road trips to nowhere in particular. There was laughter, real and loud, filling the spaces that once echoed with silence. I even reconnected with passions I had shelved long ago. I picked up my guitar again, something Marlene had once mocked as a waste of time. Jessica encouraged it, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, listening intently as if every note mattered. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not a grand, dramatic finale, not winning someone back who never deserved you in the first place, but finding yourself again, and then finding someone who loves that version of you without conditions. One evening, standing under a wide Arizona sky painted in gold and violet, I slipped a simple ring onto Jessica's finger. No elaborate speeches, no promises I couldn't keep, just a quiet vow whispered between two people who had already seen what loss looked like and chose each other anyway. When she said yes, it wasn't just the beginning of a new chapter. It was the beginning of a whole new book, one where the past was nothing more than a closed door and the future stretched out before us, wide and beautiful. Marlene. She became just a faded memory, a lesson I needed to learn the hard way. Not every loss is a tragedy. Sometimes it's simply clearing the space for something better to grow. And standing there hand in hand with the woman who loved me for who I was, I realized something powerful. I didn't just survive betrayal. I built a life that betrayal could never touch. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't just happy. I was free.